So in an interview with Jack Stack, he used a phrase I really liked. He said, ultimately, people gotta wanna.
Yeah.
And you talk a little bit about a characteristic that I think is an element of it is getting people to want to. What are those 5 things that build employee satisfaction and a strong culture and ultimately have people want to do what we would like for them to do?
I agree, you gotta wanna. But there's 2 ways of gotta wanna. First, you have to gotta wanna do the job. And I can gotta wanna do the job and don't wanna do the job for you. So we make those 2 distinctions. And it's actually a dimension of suitability as I look at it. One of the suitability traits that I see in managers is, do I have motivational competency? Really, do I exercise certain practices that are going to keep high performers engaged? And in the book, I've identified 5. There may be more, but these are 5 that I just see have high impact. The first is compensation. The interesting thing about compensation is in consulting, I have spent an inordinate amount of time with people talking about their compensation packages under the assumption that that's really the highest motivation for people. Research shows that's really not the highest motivation. Let me be very clear. It's a very important factor for anybody in a job, but it's surprising that it's not the highest motivation. The research I've looked at over the last 12 years, the specific data I have has shown that even in sales, it's rarely as strong a motivator as people think it is in sales. So what you're really looking for in compensation, and when you look at the research, is fairness of compensation. People are not necessarily looking for the highest compensation, but they want to make sure that their compensation is fair. It's on par with what other companies are paying. It's on par with what you're paying my peers in the organization. That if you get over the hurdle of fairness of compensation and consistency of compensation across the organization, then what you really are going to do is create motivation, because that you're taking that off the table. And I actually find that most companies are very good at making sure that they do have a compensation structure that's fair.
I've often heard compensation described as a hygiene factor, and that sounds a lot like the fairness that you're describing.
And I think it is. That's a great representation of it, because it is a hygiene factor. We have to do it. It needs to be fair. There are those people who are going to be motivated by it more than others, but we just need to make sure that we have an equitable compensation package. The second thing the second component of motivational competency is appreciation. Appreciation is highly motivational. I know very few people who don't like sincere appreciation. And to receive it is actually more the exception than the norm, which is terrible because it's free. It doesn't cost me anything to give appreciation. It's highly motivational. And just talking to people and saying, when was the last time you were appreciated in your job?
The fact that they have to think about it at all is probably a good indicator, right?
And so, you know, we tend as high performers to want to look at what we're not doing, what we need to do, without getting, again, a balance of what are we doing well, and let me appreciate that, and then also talking about what do we need to improve. And we have that balance, and people want that balance. What we tend to get is you're not doing this without recognizing, yeah, I did 99.9 of it beautifully, and I'm working on this fraction over here, but you know, this is where our focus is. So getting a balanced focus and really giving appreciation. I also like to give appreciation in the moment. You know, we tend to get performance reviews, and people need performance reviews. When do they get performance reviews? At the end of the year. If you want to shape behavior, appreciate what somebody's doing in the moment, or address an issue in the moment. That's where you impact behavior. So while you may want to do a year-end performance review, if you want to impact behavior, you know, appreciate in the moment, or give that kind of communication in the moment. And then communication is one of the keys to motivational competency. And as I just said, communicating about where you need to improve or what you're doing well in the moment. Very, very strong communication. The other kind of communication that is highly impactful is just to be very straight with your people, particularly when you're having a problem. People like to know what's going on. They have a feeling if something's not going well. we tend as leaders and managers to forget that the people that work for us are very highly competent people running lives separate from the organization, and they understand how to process negative information. I point to some research in the book which is fascinating, that when things get tough, companies tend to start reserving information. They don't want to share bad information, and that really creates a negative impact. So just be straight with people. Communicate what's going on and let them deal with it as adults. Another form of communication that I can't emphasize enough is to master listening. And I'll go out on a limb here, and I don't think it's a very big limb here, that most people in companies don't listen well. And I'm going out on that limb based upon an experience I had. When I was running a company, I had the opportunity to go to a leadership development retreat. And it was really a very defining experience for me. I had the opportunity, I was a reasonably young man. I was with leaders from the US, Canada, the UK, very senior people in some very, very impactful companies. And as part of this leadership development, we did something called a 360. 360 is your direct reports fill out a questionnaire on you, and you fill out the questionnaire on yourself. I've got to say, I was trying to be humble, and so I gave myself a B+, fully expecting that I was a great listener. The experience point that I had in that retreat was, here all of us had this. Not one of us broke a C on our ability to listen. And it was stunning. Here we had leaders across businesses, and none of our people felt that we listened to them. And it is so powerful. And when you don't try to influence by what you say, but by listening. You can actually, I found, gain more influence by listening than you can by speaking, because it's rooted in something that is one of the great insights I've gotten in life. After food and shelter, the most compelling human need is to be understood, not agreed with, understood. That if you give people understanding, they will give you understanding. And it creates a communication dynamic that is so powerful. So when you look at communication, put the real issues on the table. Give real-time critical feedback and listen.